The sea was black that night, not from the absence of light but from the weight of fate, far beyond the shores of a dying empire, in waters that once echoed triumph. A single shape cut through the waves like a ghost of steel and sorrow. She was not merely a ship, she was the last heartbeat of a nation. Her name was Yamato, and this would be her final breath. It did not begin with explosions. It began with silence. A silence so heavy that every man aboard could feel it in his bones. They were not sailing toward victory. They were sailing toward legend. Toward death. Toward a moment that history would try to forget, and storytellers would never be able to truly capture. That is where we are going now. Not through dry pages, not through facts and dates, but through the eyes of those who lived it. Men who already knew they would never return. Men who wrote farewell letters but never mailed them. Men who believed that even in defeat, honor could still burn brighter than fire. This is not the story of who won. This is the story of why they still fought. A battleship stronger than any before it. A crew prepared to die before surrender. An empire reduced to a final gambit, one last strike, not for victory, but for meaning. The Americans would call it Operation Tango. But for the men aboard Yamato, it was something else. A funeral march carved in steel, smoke, and salt water. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the engines starting, the steel groaning, the waves parting, the breath of 3,000 men as they step into eternity. This is the death ride of Yamato. And the tide is beginning to rise. Dawn had not yet broken, but the sky over Tokuyama was already bruised with the color of ash. War had drained the world of color long before the first siren ever wailed. Japan was collapsing, cities reduced to smoke, factories silent, rice rationed to the gram. And in the harbor, chained to fate like a beast too proud to die, rested the last giant, Yamato. Her guns slept like dormant volcanoes. Her armor gleamed like the ribs of an iron dragon. Even stripped of air support, even surrounded by fuel barrels half empty, she radiated something ancient, something terrifying. Inside the bridge, Captain Kosaku stood alone. He was not a loud man, not a dramatic man, but his silence carried the weight of every life aboard. Orders had been given. The mission was sealed. They would sail with just enough fuel to reach Okinawa, because no one expected them to come back. There was no plan for retreat. Only a destination, and a death. The first orders were whispered, not shouted. Prepare for departure. Men began to move. Boots struck steel. Chains clanged. Engines trembled. And the great ship, this floating empire of steel and pride, began to breathe again. Operation Tango had begun. The ocean stretched endless and indifferent as Yamato slipped away from Tokuyama under a sky that refused to lighten. Her wake shimmered faintly in the dark, like a scar healing in slow motion. No farewell flags waved. No crowds gathered. The mightiest ship ever built was leaving Japan unseen, uncelebrated, like a condemned king walking quietly to his execution. Inside the ship, the air was thick with oil, steel, and fear that no one dared admit. Most of the crew were barely 18. They had never fired Yamato's main guns in real combat. They had never even seen a real enemy ship. Yet here they were, steamrolling toward the largest naval force in history, with no air support, no escape plan, and no illusions. Some whispered that they were lucky. Most knew better. In the officers' quarters, soft rustling filled the silence. Paper, ink, final letters being written. All along the walls, like small memorials for men still breathing, envelopes were tucked beneath pillows or sealed inside pockets. Those letters would never reach home. Captain Rugger walked the length of the deck without speaking. He didn't need to. Every man could feel what he knew. This was not a mission. This was a ritual, a ceremony of death carried out by steel and duty. Below decks, gunners cleaned barrels that would never fire twice. Engineers tightened bolts on engines already sentenced to destruction. Every man worked as if the ship would live forever, even though every heartbeat brought her closer to the end. At noon, the wind began to shift. On the horizon, smoke appeared, too high, too distant, too silent to be anything but what they feared. American scouts. Yamato's radar operators tracked the signal. No ships yet. No bombs yet. Just eyes in the sky. Watching. Reporting. Calling death toward them like smoke rising from a funeral pyre. But Yamato did not turn. Her engines roared deeper. Black smoke trailed behind her like a banner of defiance. The escort ships, Yahaga and the destroyers, tightened formation. The fleet moved as one single heartbeat. Young sailors stood on deck staring at the sea. Some prayed. Some smiled. Some stared blankly with faces that already looked like ghosts. They knew the Americans were coming. They knew they were outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded. But they still believed that the Emperor was watching. They still believed death could be a form of victory. They still believed honor was worth blood. Morning broke like a blade. No sunrise, no warmth, just a cold grey light spilling across the sea as Yamato cut forward, her bow punching through waves with the force of a dying god refusing to kneel. The ocean was silent, but every man aboard felt the change in the air. The wind didn't just move, it watched. At 8:22 a.m., a voice broke the stillness. Multiple aircraft detected. Bearing southeast. There was no panic. No shouting. Only the feeling of something enormous turning, like the weight of fate shifting on its hinges. The men had always known this moment would come. Now it had a time, a direction, a distance. The Americans had found them. Over the radio, crackling through static like whispers from another world, came a message from the scouts. Target confirmed. Yamato and escorts. Commence attack operations. It was over, though the battle had not yet begun. Inside the ship, alarms sounded, sharp, metallic cries that ricocheted off steel walls and drilled into bone. Men rushed to stations. Hatches slammed shut. The ship became a machine, every human pulse synchronized with the heartbeat of the engines. Captain Rugger stood on the bridge, watching the horizon. He did not flinch. Far ahead, black specks appeared, tiny at first, like dust on the edge of creation. Then the sky filled with wings. They came in waves, each formation larger than the last. Fighters, torpedo bombers, dive bombers, an entire storm of steel and fire descending upon a single ship. The first bombs fell like thunder. Water erupted. Steel cracked. Flames slashed through air. Yamato's anti-air guns roared to life, hundreds of barrels spitting fire into the sky, turning the air into a burning swarm of tracers. Young gunners screamed orders, their voices shaking yet unwavering. A torpedo struck. The ship shuddered. Pipes burst. Lights flickered. But Yamato did not slow. Another hit. And another. Water surged into the lower decks. Men fought to seal bulkheads, knowing they were trapping their friends on the other side. The ship groaned, but she stayed upright, like a samurai stab but still standing. Above the smoke, an American pilot whispered into his radio, "She's still moving." Yamato answered with fire. Her massive guns thundered, not at ships, there were none, but at the sky itself. Shells exploded like worlds dying, sending shockwaves through the clouds. Her last roar was not against an enemy fleet, but against fate itself. And still, more planes came. Like vultures circling a giant that refused to fall. The sea was no longer blue. It was black with smoke and red with fire. The sound was beyond war, it was apocalyptic. Metal shrieked. Men burned. Engines screamed like dying animals. But the ship kept moving, defiantly, impossibly, toward Okinawa. She had less than an hour left to live. And every minute was a lifetime. The sea had turned into a furnace. Yamato was burning, not sinking, not broken, burning. Fire roared from her decks like breath from a wounded dragon refusing to die. Smoke crawled across the sky in towering black pillars, so thick it blocked out the sun. Her guns spat defiance into the sky. Her crew, bloodied, soaked, exhausted, clung to their posts, fighting not for victory, but for meaning. They had become ghosts before they died. From the radio room, broken transmissions cracked through static. Yahagai sinking. Abandoned ship. Destroyer Sashimo destroyed. No air support. Repeat, no air support. Every escort ship around Yamato was dying, one after another, swallowed by flame and sea. The fleet that began the mission as a squadron was becoming a funeral procession. But Yamato stayed the center of the storm, absorbing every blow meant for the others. American pilots, stunned by the ship's refusal to die, shifted tactics. They were no longer attacking to disable her. They were attacking to erase her. Dive bombers plunged through smoke like falling stars. Torpedo planes skimmed the waves, wings almost touching the water. The air filled with the howl of engines and the endless percussion of explosions. Yamato took 8 torpedoes. Then 9. Then 10. Compartments flooded. Bulkheads collapsed. 1,000 tons of sea water surged through the ship. The list began, slow at first, then sharper. Men slipped on tilted steel. Tools rolled like coins across the deck. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes. And still, she fought. In the engine room, men worked in water up to their waists, skin blistered, lungs burning, yet they refused to abandon their posts. One engineer wept as he kept the turbines alive, whispering apologies to his dead comrades as the sea swallowed them. On deck, gunners fired blind into smoke, even after their barrels glowed red hot. Even after ammunition ran low. Even after the order came to stop. Because to stop was to admit defeat. And defeat had already become impossible. Captain Eraga stood on the bridge, hat still in place, uniform torn by shrapnel and flame, eyes fixed forward. Okinawa was far beyond the horizon now. But he still looked toward it. Another torpedo struck. The ship lurched. This time, she did not recover. Yamato began to roll, slowly, heavily, like a mountain losing its balance. Alarms screamed. Water rushed toward the starboard side. The deck tilted. Men slid. Others jumped overboard, their bodies swallowed instantly by burning oil. Some refused to leave. Some held the rail and watched the sea rise toward them. Some stood at attention as the world collapsed. And in that moment, just as steel met inevitability, Yamato's heart stopped. Her engines died. Her guns fell silent. But her spirit was not done. Deep within the ship, below the flames, below the sea water, below everything human, something detonated. A magazine explosion. A son was born underwater. The blast tore the ship apart. A column of fire and steel ripped into the sky like a volcanic spear, nearly a mile high. The sea itself recoiled. Men in planes miles away felt the shock wave vibrate through their wings. There was no ship now. Only pieces. Only echoes. And then, silence. The iron tide had fallen. The fire subsided before the screams did. Where the greatest warship in human history once cut the sea like a blade, there was now only smoke, oil, and human fragments drifting like ash across a burning ocean. The waters boiled with fuel and blood. Debris floated like shattered bones of a fallen titan. Yamato was gone. But not everyone aboard her was dead. Amidst the black waves, men surfaced, burned, blind, bleeding, clinging to planks, oil drums, anything that could float. Their breaths were shallow, their voices hoarse. They no longer called for rescue. They simply called for home. Many were still dying, not from wounds, but from the cold truth that there was no ship left to belong to. No way to return. No victory to claim. They had given everything a man could give. And still the war marched on without them. Destroyers who survived the first attack doubled back, risking their own destruction to pull survivors from the fire-blackened sea. Men were dragged aboard, shaking, sobbing, silent. Some refused to climb the nets, insisting they must go down with their ship. Some stared blankly, eyes fixed on the burning horizon where Yamato had vanished. One sailor whispered only 2 words before losing consciousness. She stood. Only 276 survived. Over 3,000 were gone. When the news returned to Japan, there was no public announcement. No parade. No mourning ceremony. The empire could not afford grief, not anymore. To most of the world, Yamato simply vanished like a myth swallowed by the sea. But inside the hearts of those who lived, something remained. Something too heavy to speak and too sacred to forget. She was built to change the war. She died without firing at a single ship. But she did not die quietly. She showed the world the meaning of resolve, even when hope was already dead. The legacy. Years passed. The war ended. Japan left.